So class today is heart opening. We talked in the last class about letting everything in, welcoming things into our lives. And just from our short conversation this morning, we do have a lot going on. So can we welcome that also with an open heart? So find a comfortable seat. That could be in Sukhasana or Virasana. If you're feeling extremely depleted today or tired, you could go to your back. And in your seat, if you are in a seat, rest your hands in your lap and just kind of move back and forth slightly on your sit bones and find neutral. Neutral sitting with the pelvis level, right to left, front to back. If it's comfortable for you, you can close down your eyes. If not, you can just sort of have a slightly downward gaze. And then draw your low back in slightly. Draw your low back in slightly. And engage slightly at the core, so the navel sort of upstrokes. And then think about the space between your eyes and the top of your head. That sometimes is lost space. All right. See if you can fill your whole height. So nice tall spine. Relax your shoulder tops. And relax your face. In particular, relax the eyes and the ears. So we'll come back to this seat at the end of practice as well. Our peak pose, sometimes we do a work up to a peak pose, and our peak pose actually at the end of the practice is going to be inhaling. So we'll come back to this seat at the end, but just steady your breath here and see if you can get an even inhale and exhale. And I'll just share a couple of things about the heart. So anatomically, the heart sits right behind the breastbone, the sternum, a little bit to the left, and it's sandwiched between the right and the left lung. And these organs are they're connected. They move together, they breathe together, they pulse together. So I find it interesting, sort of from a metaphysical standpoint, even, that right now with this respiratory virus, we have a lot of also our hearts are being affected, whether we have COVID or not, whether we've had any symptoms or any a brush with it or not. The organ of the heart and the organ of the lungs are connected. And the lungs kind of envelop the heart, as it were. So in the yoga tradition, the space where the heart sits is called the the heart cave, the cave of the heart. And it's meant to be this sort of, if you think of a cave, this dark spot, this dark place where we can go inward for our own reflection and growth, our deep inner self. So we'll work today with some back bending to open the heart space. And maybe that will allow you to have some deeper looking in. So right now, if you could just focus on, or bring your attention to, I guess, bring your attention to your heart condition this morning. Your heart condition this morning. Gandhi said that it is better to have, in prayer, it is better to have a heart without words than words without a heart. It's better to have a heart without words than words without a heart. So yoga to me anyway, and I think to some of you, I feel is a prayerful practice. It's a meditation through the body. And so we'll celebrate the fact that we get to do this prayerful practice with a heart and with heart. Okay. And then from here, friends, just go ahead and you can open up your eyes if you've got your eyes closed, and we'll stay in this seated position for just a minute. I'm going to scoot back so you can see me. And in your Sukhasana, bring your blocks to the outside of your hips, So I'm going to turn a couple different positions to show. But when we work with asana, which we're going to do next, and we are specifically working with back bends, there's a couple of places in the body that are very, very important to focus on, besides the arching or the arcing of the back. And one is our pelvis, the sacroiliac joint at the bottom of the spine, and how that connects to the sides of the pelvis, and then our core. So super important. So sit in your upright position and slightly draw the low back in. So you have the pubic bone moving away from the navel, and a slight curve in your low back. And then to place your hands on the blocks with your elbows bent. And then press into the blocks as if you were going to lift yourself off the floor. It doesn't necessarily have to happen, but feel how when you do that, it tightens the muscles in your lower abdomen between a bit below your navel, and then relax. So about 3 inches below the navel, this lower abdominal portion. So we're going to work with the transverse abdominis muscles. So again, take your hands to the block, draw your low back in, and then press into the blocks and try to lift your booty off the floor, your hips off the floor. Don't have to lift, but feel the tension there, or the contraction in the lower belly. Good, and then release back down. Now, from this position, just rest your hands for a minute, and now take a couple of breaths, and on your exhale, draw your pelvic floor, that hammock of musculature between anus and urethra, draw the pelvic floor up on the exhale. And inhale and relax. And on the exhale, gather the pelvic floor up. And then release. And then take your hands back to the block so you feel that action now. So now, draw the low back in slightly. Press your hands into the block and lift, and see if you can get a sense that there is a gathering at the pelvic floor when you do this. Release back down. Okay. And then nice tall spine again, draw the low back in. And then with your hands on the blocks again, now lift the pelvic floor first. And feel like you're going to draw your hip pointers in towards one another. Press into the blocks and lift. And then release back down. Okay, so I'll turn this way just to, just as we do this one more time. So the comparison, so this is where the blocks are going, right by my hips. All right, and then I can do that whole business one more time. Draw the low back in slightly. So I'm moving the pubic bone away from the navel. And then I gather the pelvic floor. And then I press and lift. And I feel the transverse abdominis, this lower band of muscles in the abdominals contracting. And I set back down. Now you should feel when you do that, you might feel, hopefully you feel a broadening across the back where the sacral iliac joint is, where the bottom of the spine, the sacrum meets the pelvis. This is super important for back bending because when we go into a back bend, we put a lot of pressure. There's a lot of work in the low back. So if you wanted to experiment with a difference, you could scoop the pubic bone towards the navel, sort of rounding the back, and then press and lift. And you might feel more of a pinching around the sacroiliac joint, and then lower that back down. Okay? So this is going to be important throughout the practice that we have this awareness of this musculature just a little bit below the navel, transverse abdominis, and that we're working with the pelvic floor. So now just come to your back. And if you need to fiddle for a couple of minutes, just some little organic movement, you can. But take your arms beside you and rest the soles of your feet on the floor. And then just move through some pelvic tilts. So on the inhale, draw your pubic bone away from your navel. And on your exhale, draw the pubic bone back towards the navel. So you have the sense of how the pelvis moves forward and backward. Moving forward and backward through its range of motion in this direction. Great. And then the next time you take an exhale, consciously upstroke the navel. Draw the navel up and in. Inhale, release. Move the pubic bone away from the navel. And then the next time you exhale, consciously upstroke the navel and gather the pelvic floor. Inhale and exhale. Draw the navel up and in, gather the pelvic floor up and in, and feel for bringing the hip pointers towards one another. There won't be a lot of movement, but it's sort of like tightening a corset. And just do that a few more times. Okay, and then the next time, release all that work, but the next time you take an exhale, instead of bringing your low back all the way to the floor, leave the pelvis tilted just slightly forward, but gather the pelvic floor up, upstroke the navel, and draw the hip pointers towards one another. You have a little bit of arch in the back. This is on the exhale. And then on the inhale, release all that. Let the belly rise. Draw a little bit more arch in your back if you want. And then on the exhale, draw the pelvic floor up. Navel upstrokes. Hip pointers towards one another. So then the low back is not touching the floor on the exhale. And you're gathering the lower muscles, the transverse abdominis. You're exhaling and gathering together there without touching your low back to the floor. All right, and then let that go. And now just bring your arms nice and wide, maybe goalpost arms. Let's move through the pelvis, right and left with the knees. So dropping knees to the right, knees to the left, just opening through the hips a bit. So for back bending, we need the hips to be open, the front of the thighs to be open. We need the shoulders to be open. So now come back to neutral, and then you'll come up onto one forearm and onto the other forearm, so that you're resting sort of halfway between sitting and lying down. And then, well, let's actually come all the way up to sitting. So we'll come all the way up to sitting, and there'll be some variations with this, but you'll take your left leg back, lining your outer leg up with the long edge of your mat, so parallel to your thigh. And then you might be able to rest back onto your forearms here. You might be able to rest all the way down on your back, or you might be still rather upright. And if this is not possible in your body, you could simply come onto your side and stretch the top of your thigh in this way. So Supta Virasana without the block. I guess another option would be to take the block between, if you come to Virasana this way with the block between you, and then you can lean back and rest on your hands. But we're opening the top of the thigh. We'll go one leg at a time. So the quadricep here opening. And then you can switch and take the other leg. So the leg that I'm not stretching could be out, it could be out straight. If you're off a block, if you're all the way down on the floor, you might have the opposite leg reaching away. Make sure though that your outer leg, your foot is toes are pointing back, they're not under your body or out to the side, but you have this relatively parallel, lower leg parallel to the thigh, just to the outside of it. And then from here, if you're lying down, you can come up to your elbows, and then you can sit up and take the legs out in front in Dandasana. We'll just do a little counter. So here in Dandasana, just like our beginning seated position, draw the low back in. Press your legs into the floor. And just right here, open through the collarbone. So reach the heart space, that place, the cave of the heart. Just sort of reach it up and out. That's it. Just up and out. Legs are engaged. Good. And then relax, release, take your legs over to one side and come to all fours. So we'll do a few rounds of cat-cow here. So knees under the hips and hands under the shoulders or a little forward. We've been working with the hands and the arms a lot recently. So press into the mounds of the index, middle, and thumb, mounds of those fingers. Then on your inhale, draw your heart forward. Get that little arch in the back on the cow. You could turn your toes under if you wanted. And on your exhale, round your back, press into your hands, and draw your tailbone down towards your heels and tuck your chin. And just move back and forth in that way a few times. Feeling into your spine and how it is right now. Breath and movement matching. married together, moving together. Great. And so now the next time you round your back, we'll set the hips back to the heels in child's pose. And just take your gaze in towards your heart. So the heart energy system or energy center is called the Anahata chakra. And that word means unstruck chord. I've heard it described as the place that can never be damaged. Okay, our heart can never. It's the place that's always protected. And of course, we go through life, and lots of things take place, and sometimes we cover and cover and cover and cover and collapse in on our heart. But the promise in the spiritual traditions is that this is the place, this is the unstruck chord, this is the place that is never, can never be violated. Okay, so we're going to come into a pose called puppy pose, right? Anahastasana. So from your child's pose, come back up to all fours. Take your knees as wide as your hips, turn your toes under. Now, just tilt your pelvis a little bit so you're drawing your pubic bone away from your navel. All right, and then reach your hands forward, strong hands, strong arms, and begin to melt your heart towards the floor. You keep your hips lined up over your knees and you melt your heart towards the floor. Arms are strong, elbows lifted off the floor. And the heart space is melting towards the floor. It looks like a relatively easy pose, but it can be challenging. If you can rest your forehead right to the floor, do that. If you need a block underneath your forehead, you can do that. But feel for the heart melting towards the floor. Holding this pose, 3 more rounds of breath. Your gaze is in towards the cave of the heart. And then from here, lift your forehead, lift your gaze, drop your forearms to the floor, and slide yourself forward into Sphinx. Press the tops of your feet into the floor and spiral the inner leg towards the ceiling. Draw the shoulder blades down and in. Okay. Now feel for that engagement. See if you can draw, even in tension, the hip pointers towards one another. Draw the pelvic floor up. Upstroke the navel. Press into your forearms. Now we'll take the right forearm and take it in front of our body, lined up with the short edge of the mat, and lean over to the right just slightly, enough to reach back and take either your pants, your pant leg, or the top of your foot in sort of this is a pretty significant opener, back opener, or heart opener in and of itself, front body opener. And release. Come back to Sphinx. Press into your pubic bone, so anchor through the pubic bone. Spiral the inner legs towards the ceiling. Gather the pelvic floor. Pull the hip pointers towards one another. Draw the shoulder blades down the back. So we're getting all squared up again. And then you can take the left forearm and line it up with the short edge of your mat and reach around for the right leg. And then release. Come back to Sphinx. Anchor through the pubic bone. Spiral the inner legs towards the ceiling. Press into the tops of your feet. Upstroke the navel. Gather the pelvic floor. Pull the hip pointers towards one another. And then release all the way down to the floor. And take your arms alongside your body, palms up. Okay, so we'll go to Salambhasana, locust. So press the tops of your feet into the floor and spiral your inner thighs towards the ceiling. See if that helps you create some space in your low back. And then you want to go ahead right here, and even though we're anchoring through the pubic bone, we're going to tilt the pubic bone a bit away from, so we get the arch in the back. We're tilting the pelvis, pubic bone away from navel. Gather the pelvic floor, hip pointers towards one another. Lift your arms away from the floor first. So the shoulder tops lift up, and you take your shoulder blades in and down, and then lift your head. We'll do a couple variations of this pose. So working in the middle back. And each time we'll come down and we'll just digest the pose. So one of the things about back bending is back bends are very energizing. They're very uplifting. So they're a big part of yoga. They stimulate the thoracic, that's the middle of the back, where a lot of the sympathetic nerves are. And so they get us kind of fired up. The great thing about back bends, though, too, is that when we release from a back bend, so let's go ahead and release to the floor, take one cheek or temple to the mat, we get to experience the post back bend bliss, because we have the counter happening. Once we release, then we downgrade the sympathetic nervous system. We get into the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's really nice, and I think rather important, to have the rest in between. Put the other cheek or temple to the mat, turning your head in the opposite direction. And then come back to center, and then take your forehead to the floor, spiral the inner thighs towards the ceiling, and even though you're anchoring through the pubic bone, there's a teeny bit of tilting the pubic bone away from the navel. So you have a little bit of that forward, the pelvis tilting forward. Okay, and then lifting the arms off the back. You could keep the arms alongside your body or bring them out to a T and then lift. Now, each variation is up to you. You could lift, you could keep the arms alongside your body. You could bring them here. You could lift the legs and the arms together. But we'll just do a few. And if you want to change the position while we're holding, you can. And then release down to the floor and get the little post bliss. So one cheek to the mat, and then the opposite cheek to the mat. And then bring your forehead back to center. Press into the tops of the feet, inner spiral the legs up towards the ceiling. Now we might interlace the hands at the sacrum and reach the shoulder tops up, reaching the hands away. Press and lift. Lift just the head and shoulders. Lift the legs here as well. Gaze is just off the front of your mat. Engage the pelvic floor. And release down to the floor, one cheek to the mat. At least one full breath cycle with each turning of your head, each side that the head is turned, right? One breath cycle there. Let's do one more variation. So bring the forehead back to the floor, tops of the feet into the floor, spiral the inner thighs towards the ceiling. Pubic bone anchors you, but you draw the pubic bone a bit away from the navel. That it creates this ability to gather the pelvic floor up, right? And then we can bring the arms in any position you want. I'm going to take mine forward like a big Y, and then lift and lift my legs. Like I'm a super person, which I am, and so are you, rocketing through the sky. Great, and then bring your hands right underneath your shoulders, press up through table, pausing here, and slowly taking your hips back towards your heels. We won't go all the way to child's pose, so we'll keep the head lifted, and then come right back up to cow. Okay, so here with we're drawing the pubic bone away from the navel, and I'm going to gather at the pelvic floor, and I'm going to gather at my core, turn my toes under, lift my knees off the mat, and press back, downward facing dog. So downward facing dog is a way of extending the spine, getting length through the spine, and that little bit of pelvic tilt is going to help us do that. So if you want to play with this some more, you can come back down to your knees. So what I'm suggesting is that there's a little, you're going to tilt the pelvis, pubic bone away from navel, right? And you get a little arch in the back, and that's where we go from to downward facing dog. Inhale the right leg up behind you. And you can bend that knee and sweep the right foot forward. Place the left foot up and out and come on up to warrior two legs. Good. All right. Let's inhale the arms up. And settle into a solid, strong warrior one. Gather the pelvic floor, upstroke the navel. And we have the pubic bone, we have the pelvis tilted right here. This is a back bend, so pubic bone is moving away from navel, but feel for the hip pointers moving towards one another as you gather everything up. And then let's just vinyasa here. So we'll open, inhale, open the arms out, opening through the chest, and then exhale, straighten the front leg and fold. Inhale, Bend through the front leg and open through your chest. Exhale, straighten the front leg and fold. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. Spread the arms wide. Open through the chest. Exhale. Straighten the front leg and just fold slightly and bring the hands together. And then last time, hold this. Turn the palms up towards the ceiling and then bring the hands together above your head. Reach the ring fingers towards the ceiling and then exhale your hands down around your front foot. Step your front foot back to meet your back foot, downward facing dog. Inhale the left foot out or the other one, whatever one you're on, and exhale, bring that forward. Bring the back foot up and out and come up into warrior one, opposite side. Warrior one, legs. Good, and we'll inhale the arms up. So you have a slight curve in the low back, lumbar spine moving in, pubic bone moving away from navel. Gather the pelvic floor up and the hip pointers towards one another to use the transverse abdominis, your lower abdominal muscles. Good. And then from here, the next time you inhale, we'll bring the arms out wide, opening through the chest, and exhale, round and bring the hands together. Inhale to sweep open. You might lift your head and your gaze if you're feeling warm enough for that. And exhale, round and bring the arms together, hands together in front of you. A couple more. Inhale to open up. And exhale, round and sweep the hands forward. And then this time we'll inhale and hold this here. Turn the palms up to face the ceiling, so external rotation in the arms, and then lift the arms up, hands meet. Strong abdominal work. Inhale, reach the fingertips up towards the ceiling. Exhale, hands down around the front foot. Step back, downward facing dog. And now inhale up forward into high Dandasana, the plank pose. So because our hands, we've done, in the last couple weeks, we've done hands, arms, shoulders. We know that fascially, everything is connected, the hands to the heart. So when we do these hand balancing, like downward dog and plank, this activates the heart center. So activating the heart center here. Right, and then press back, downward facing dog. And then inhale to walk your feet forward to your hands. Deep bend over the knees. And then inhale, reach your crown long, Ardha Uttanasana. Halfway fold. Take your hands to your hips, elbows towards one another, and hinge up at the waist and come to Tadasana. Okay, so a little bit more structural awareness. So in Tadasana, we actually lock the pelvis. So we're stacking our head here over our pelvis. And that area that I was talking about where the sacroiliac joint, we actually lock that. We want it there for stability. We want it to be locked there for stability, right? But when we move, when we're doing the vinyasa, when we're going in and out of poses, we want that, that area to have movement, to be unlocked. Great. So from your Tadasana now, inhale the arms up and take your right wrist with your left hand, and then just open into a lateral bend. Come back to center and go in the opposite direction. So we need the side bodies to be open as well to come into these deeper back bends. And we'll take one more on each side. And then release the arms. And now we'll take, the feet could be a little wider apart. We'll inhale the arms up and reach the right hand down towards the right thigh and open. Reaching over with the left hand. And then inhale, sweep up. Exhale, opposite hand to the outer thigh, reaching over. Let's go one more time in each direction. Great. And then come back to the top of your mat and inhale, reach the arms up. Exhale, fold through center. Take your hands to the mat, step back, downward facing dog. Inhale to come forward into high dandasana. And then exhale, lower to the mat. You could take your knees to the mat or lower through chaturanga, bringing the chest between the hands. Draw the hands back slightly. Press the pubic bone, anchor through the pubic bone, and inhale into a baby cobra. And then press into your hands, come up through all fours, and release your hips back to your heels in child's pose. And then just come sitting on your heels. And now we're gonna work with Ustrasana, the camel pose. So if you need a blanket to pad your knees, grab that. And then we'll have at least one block for this work, okay? And you may end up wanting to have two. So interesting posture. I'll just share something briefly about my own experience. So when I started doing yoga, I started with Bikram yoga, the hot yoga. And because I liked its sort of athleticism. And whenever I would go into camel, which is part of the sequence, the 26 postures, I couldn't even hold the pose. I just would cry. It was such an intense unburdening for me, okay? So when a camel goes to its knees, right? So the camel goes to its knees, and what it goes to its knees so that the people that are riding the camel can get off. So it goes to its knees to unburden itself. So we're going to mimic that a bit, okay? So I'll try to do a couple different positions to show this to you, but take a block. We're going to take a block between the upper inner legs for this, and I'll turn sideways now. And so the block, you want the block to be at the side that's going to allow your legs to stay pretty parallel and right under your hips, parallel and under the hips, okay? So, and then turn the toes under, all right? Now, we're going to go back to some of that really subtle work. So squeeze the block as if you're trying to lift it up towards your pelvic floor. And then try to take it, and then take the block back towards your sacrum. or towards your sit bones. Okay, I'll give those two cues again. So when I did that, that created that just right amount of arch in my low back. So I squeeze the block as if I'm pulling it up towards my pelvic floor, and then I take it back towards my sit bones. Okay, now I'm going to act like I'm going to release the block. So I take, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just release my grip on it as if I'm going to release it, right? Okay, everybody get that part? And then see how that changes the space in my back. I should have a little bit more space when I do that, not as much gripping. Okay, gather the pelvic floor. And on your next inhale, just begin to, you could take your hands to your low back if you want, or to your waist, but on your inhale, press your hips forward. Press your hips forward. Upstroke the navel. Draw the hip pointers together. So check everything out. Are you over gripping the block? You could take the block out at this point if you've got the pelvic floor engaged and you've got the lower abdominals engaged and it feels pretty good, or you could just leave it here. We'll start with the chin tucked, the head looking forward, and then you'll reach back, keep pressing the hips forward, reach back for your heels with your hands. And then as you release, you sort of pop forward. Now, if that is not happening in your body, you can go one at a time, reaching back for one heel at a time. So the opposite arm comes up, right? And you just go back for one heel at a time. But let's go through everything one more time. So we're going to squeeze the block as if we're trying to pull it up and bring it right up to our pelvic floor. And then I sort of, my thighs are rotating inwards as I try to push it back towards my tailbone, the block towards my tailbone. Might help if I turn this way a little bit, right? And then I soften my grip on the block, as if I'm going to let it come down to the floor, but I don't release it. All right, and then I'm going to lengthen through the side bodies. So you might reach your arms up just to help you lengthen through the side bodies. But I like to keep my hands here or here. And then I'm going to inhale, draw the pelvic floor up, gather at the waist. And as I begin to press my hips forward, keeping my chin tucked, broadening through my chest, then I can reach back. And I might reach back for one. Here's one variation. Reach back for one heel, opposite arm comes up. Or I reach back for both heels. Okay, chin forward, chin tucked, head forward. We'll do this one more time. So we kind of come out the same way we have come in. We have all this energy, we're kind of getting all this kinetic energy in our body, and it almost, when we release our hands, it almost springs us back up to center. So you could do one more like that. And if that was pretty accessible for you, you can take the block out. You can start, gather with all those instructions. So it's as if you're squeezing the block up, right? And you're spiraling the inner thigh back, right? There's a drawing of the pubic bone away from the navel and gathering the lower abdominals in. So if this feels accessible to you, right here, you could put the tops of your feet to the floor and come back to your heels. Keep pressing the hips forward. And maybe it feels okay to let your head go as well. But you have to decide. And then when you come out, take your time. If you've had your head all the way back, you might feel a little dizzy. Great, and then we'll go from here, just sitting down onto the heels. Taking a few rounds of breath. So this is the post back bend bliss. Enjoy it. Feel it. Then we'll come forward onto hands and knees. Taking a few rounds of cat-cow. Then we'll set our hips back. Keep the arms extended. So almost like we're doing another little puppy pose, but we're gonna slowly and with deep engagement in the abdominals, drop our hips back to our heels. Then the forehead to the floor. Arms alongside. Full balasana. Feel the spreading across your low back. And then pressing into your hands, come up. And you can come to your back right away, or a suggestion, kind of a fun suggestion, is just to come onto your right side. So one of the things I remember about my grandma, when I would snuggle in bed with her, is she always told me to sleep on my right side so that my heart could rest. So you could come to a Shavasana on your on your right side, just in a comfortable position on the right side with the head on the outstretched arm. Letting your heart now rest. And at any point in time, come over onto your back. And taking anything that you need to further your bliss. So that could be, you might want to do a twist to finish, or you might do some variation of a happy baby. You might just be ready to let everything settle back into the floor, getting the support of the earth, and resting in Shavasana. And we'll stay here for a few rounds of breath. You could also take a supported bridge stand, a bridge pose with the sacrum lifted. This is also a heart opener. It's nice, really gentle heart opener if you wanted to continue in this with the heart opening. You take your legs up the wall, the imaginary wall, or just up. And this is a also really great for the heart. This is a little inversion, supported shoulder stand. If shoulder stands in your practice, you can go there. And then bringing your attention really to your heart, bringing maybe your hands to that space, cave of the heart. And we've talked about this a number of times over the last few weeks too. What really matters to you? What is your heart's desire? What's important to you? What matters? How has this time of inward reflection and this time of impact around this whole heart space with this pandemic, how has it been for you? How has it allowed you to grow and change and learn? Perhaps you're offering some gratitude for this community together, those people that make it possible for you to practice, for the people that some of us collectively we are seeing our parents spiral out of this embodiment. Gratitude for them, perhaps others. Gratitude for this, the essence of who we are, this supreme essence that really uh, doesn't ever die. The seat of the soul. Soften your hands to soften your heart. And then we'll, you can stay in Shavasana if you would like. I did promise some pranayama at the end, but if you're happy here in Shavasana, just remain here. Otherwise, you can come up to the seat. And as I was saying, our peak pose might be inhaling today. So we, as human beings, we sometimes fail to deeply inhale and allow the fullness of our lives to materialize because we're anxious about things or we're fearful. And so now for this short pranayama, I invite you to deepen the inhale, and this is all through the nostrils. Deepen the inhale and soften the exhale. Lengthen the inhale and soften the exhale. Keep lengthening the inhale, deepening the inhale, maybe even closing off the left side of the nostrils and inhaling through the right side, more energizing side. Might be just enough just to deepen the inhale. And wherever you are, bring your hands together in front of the Anahata chakra, the heart chakra, the unstruck chord. May the merit of our practice encourage all beings to unveil the hidden brilliance that lies within. Namaste.